Welcome to episode 3 of Behind the Bills. I'm Iván Carrillo. Coming up, we're less than 3 months away from Election Day. We're going to talk about ACSA's role in all of this. What is a political action committee? How does it work? How does ACSA endorse candidates? We'll answer all these questions and more. Plus a sit-down conversation with Dorothy Johnson, ACSA legislative advocate. We're coming into the final stretch of the legislative session. Where do things stand? We'll get you caught up to speed. So let's jump right in. As I'm sure you've noticed, election season is in full swing. I'm sure you're getting text messages, calls, emails, being inundated with information about candidates and things that are on the ballot. Here in California, there are 100 legislative races that are taking place. What's really unique about this election cycle is that 34 of those seats are non-incumbent races. These are going to be fresh faces in these seats. So this type of turnover within the legislature doesn't happen too frequently. So what that presents is real opportunity. It's opportunity to make sure that we are collectively electing folks who support ACSA and our members' vision for this state, in particular, our vision for public education. I can't emphasize enough the importance of each and every one of these Senate and Assembly seats. You all are impacted on a daily basis by the decisions that these policymakers make, how money is allocated, laws that you and your staff have to comply with. There are two ways that we support candidates. One is we endorse and put our name behind individuals. Secondly, we have a political action committee that we utilize to contribute funds to campaigns in support of candidates. Let's start with endorsements. ACSA uses a multi-layered process to vet candidates. It's one that we at the staff level are involved with. The ACSA vice presidents for legislative action have a leadership role in this. Broader regional membership provides input, and ultimately it's our board of directors who make any final determinations related to endorsements. Every single candidate has to fill out a questionnaire, so we have in writing, on record, folks' opinions on things that matter to us. We carefully analyze their track records. What is their history in working with public school leaders? What is their history in work to support schools within their communities? If they have an elected position already at the local level, what votes have they taken? What have they led and put their name behind? We also interview candidates. We press them on issues that are important to our members. And by we, I mean local committees made up of our members who live within these legislative districts, meet with them, assess them, and provide a recommendation to our board of directors on whether or not an individual should be endorsed. ACSA endorsed 18 legislative candidates for the primary election, and I'm happy to report that 17 of those were successful in the primary and will be on the ballot November 5th for the general election. A handful of these names are people that many of you are going to be familiar with. They're longtime friends and allies of ACSA. These include Assemblywoman Megan Daly, who's running for an open Senate seat. Assemblymember Almer Itsuchi, who's the chair of the Assembly Education Committee. Senator Josh Newman, who is the chair of the Senate Education Committee. And leaders of both houses, Speaker Robert Rivas, Senate Pro Tem Mike McGuire. But some of these names are fresh faces and ones that we are really excited about. Two of those notable individuals are Robert Garcia, who is from ACSA Region 10, from the Inland Empire. He's one of us. He is currently an assistant principal. He's a longtime ACSA member. He serves on a local school board. He's somebody who knows our issues. He's somebody who has relationships with our members, and we are working really hard to get him elected in November. Another example is Darshana Patel, ACSA Region 18, broader San Diego County. She's somebody who we're really excited about having in Sacramento. She is the president of a local school board, longtime leader within the local PTA, president of the region's school board association. Both these individuals are entrenched in education policy, have the relationships and the knowledge to come up here and hit the ground running and be longtime champions for public education and longtime friends and allies of statewide ACSA, but more importantly for you within those local communities. Let's circle back and talk about political action committees, otherwise known as PACs. What is a PAC? Political action committees are vehicles that provide organizations, individuals, an ability to make contributions to campaign accounts. ACSA has had a PAC for many years, and specifically ACSA's PAC is what is known as a small contributor committee, which means the amount that members contribute is less than $100 each. This is voluntary. This is non-public funds. So I want to make that point very clear because that question often is asked. To further clarify, it is unlawful for any public school dollars to be used to fund political action committees. For all intents and purposes, ACSA is the only statewide education management organization that has a political action committee. Having a PAC uniquely positions ACSA to achieve our advocacy goals for a couple of reasons. One, as we discussed earlier, it gives us an opportunity to contribute resources to candidates that are aligned with our mission, our vision, our values, and help elect them. But two, it also provides opportunity to develop relationships. Both of these pillars are a really crucial piece to our broader advocacy strategy and really help us in achieving our advocacy goals. I encourage you to look at our website, ACSA.org/endorsements, to see the candidates that we've endorsed. In addition to the 17 that I mentioned earlier, our board of directors has since endorsed 2 additional candidates. So if you live within one of these districts, please get to know these candidates. And please know that ACSA has the highest level of confidence in these individuals to be great representatives of you, your school communities, and champions for public education. One last thing. Proposition 2, the statewide school facilities bond, is also going to be on the ballot in November. This would provide more than $8 billion for school facilities. Your voices are critical to us passing Proposition 2. So please talk about why the statewide school facilities bond is important to meeting the needs of your students. Now let's get to our conversation with Dorothy Johnson. Hey, Dorothy.
Hey, Iván.
Welcome to Behind the Bills. I'm really excited to have you here today and looking forward to just talking. It's really interesting times in our world. So looking forward to our listeners hearing about, the last month of session and just what's taking place. Before we talk about that, I just really want our listeners to know a little bit more about you and your background and how you came to ACSA. Can you just talk about your path prior to ACSA? It's an interesting one.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to join my first Behind the Bills podcast. Hope to join for future shows. But I've been a longtime ACSA fan in my prior positions working for local government associations. So whether it was with the League of California Cities, the California Special Districts Association, the counties statewide association as a lobbyist, always trying to find ways to partner with ACSA, knowing it was a solid foundation for any education management issues that were coming our way. So longtime coalition partner, and then I was able to join the team in-house back in November of 2021, coming up on almost 3 years, and it's been great. I've loved getting to learn the same issues, but from a schools and education's lens.
Now you bring a really unique set of experiences and lenses to this work, and so just see it on a daily basis, that local government background in particular, the relationships you have, and how you're able to see these broader issues that face public agencies in a really comprehensive manner. So we're just so happy that you're here. Let me ask you, we're now in these final weeks of the legislative session. This has been a 2-year legislative session. Can you just share a little bit about like what happens during this time frame? What just process wise, timeline wise, kind of big picture, where things are at right now?
Yeah, for sure. And, we're wrapping up a month of the summer recess right now. I'm personally ready to get back to work. It's been nice to decompress, have a little chill time, but I'm ready to start walking the halls and letting ACSA's positions be known across the street in the Capitol. So a couple of big deadlines. And right now the legislature is looking at about 1,300 bills to still work on. That's not even to mention some of these bills that were dead or mostly dead for any of those Princess Bride fans out there, bills that are going to come back to life even though maybe it died in committee or it got held on the floor. There's still a window. So the first big thing is going to be the appropriations committees. Those are the fiscal committees. And if a bill has a general fund impact of more than $150,000, which by today's standards doesn't seem like a whole heck of a lot of money, that's basically like postage for an administrative fee, they'll get heard. And then there's this sort of secondary appropriations committee deadline, the suspense file. And that's where, some good policies are just too expensive to move on to the floor for a vote. They end up getting held. Sometimes it's a really good way to hold bills that are a little controversial. Maybe leadership doesn't want to see move forward. The suspense file is a way to quietly make bills go away. So it'll be interesting to see who survives and who moves on and who gets held back. So, okay, we got 2 weeks of appropriations. And then 2 weeks of floor. Only the floor can meet. So the Senate and the Assembly, they got to process those 1,000+ bills, get them over back to the House of Origin before it gets to the governor's desk. Then the governor has about a month to sign or veto any of the bills that show up. And it's going to be a sprint to the finish for sure. We don't know exactly what could also pop up in trailer bills. Those are the sort of budget bills that are actually substantive policy changes. So we'll be all ears, all eyes on deck for this last month. And I'm excited to get going.
Now, as you're talking, I'm thinking about Schoolhouse Rock and just how the legislative process works. In theory, but then it just multiplying that by 1,300, right? And that's only the bills that are here in this last month, not including the thousands more that have already moved to the process earlier in this legislative session. And certainly those deadlines that you pointed out are like really critical for our work, right? Especially the bills that we don't like, that we want to go away. Those appropriations deadlines are really important places for us where a large number of bills are held and are no longer. There's been some changes in just the implementation of the 72-hour rule.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how has that changed things here in Sacramento?
Yeah. So back in the day when I was a newer lobbyist, bills could be introduced as late as 11:55 p.m. the night of the last night of session. And I remember working bills that swept the vehicle license fee away from local governments into the general fund with literally 12 hours notice. But about 10 years ago, they changed that rule because maybe it's not the best policy making process to have something introduced without stakeholders being able to weigh in, without having full committee hearings. I don't know. The wisdom of Senator Wolk out of Davis, she introduced a bill that prohibited bills from being introduced without 72 hours. Basically, something has to be around for 3 days before the legislature can take action on it. And there's always exceptions to the rules. There's emergency situations. Amendments can be taken, but you can't drop a brand new bill in. Bills that we called mushroom bills because they would pop up in the middle of the night out of nowhere and you have to take action. So what that really did is it just moved that 72-hour crunch time from, instead of being 11:55 the last night of session, to being 11:55 3 days before the end of session. But I will say it has definitely made for a smoother, calmer end of session. So when you're up at 2 a.m., turning the clock back, it's what you're working on at least.
I remember when I was starting in my career in the legislature, hearing about examples of when they would stop the clock.
Yep.
and it would be 11:59 for like 3 or 4 hours in a row as they just continue to just introduce things and have deliberations, and their way of just, I mean, quote unquote, meeting the deadline by actually stopping the physical clock that sat inside the legislative chambers. Let me ask you about like our efforts, and there's a lot still in play here this last month. There's going to be a lot of work on our end to support some bills, to prevent others from going to the governor's desk. Share some information about just where our efforts are going to be focused here in this last month.
For me, in my portfolio, I cover everything from governance, so public meetings, elections, Brown Act, to employee relations, to state pension, technology, broadband, anything else that kind of pops up that
Is that it?
doesn't
No,
fall
just
under
checking.
my other colleagues' portfolio. So kind of the behind the scenes policies that you don't see really show up directly, helping kids in the classroom or that sort of thing. But the biggest bill we're working on, this probably sounds familiar for the listeners out there, is AB 2088. This creates a new hiring process. So even if you've got very qualified people for your classified positions at any level, you have to hire the most senior ranking person for that position if they're an internal candidate. Also delays the hiring by about 2 weeks if you need to hire someone externally because perhaps someone in your internal candidate pool isn't qualified or they're just not interested in that position. This is a reintroduction of last year's AB 1699 that we were successful in getting a governor's veto message on because he said point blank, this will hurt students. This will have negative impacts on students. And so we've been working the current bill, AB 2088, basically since it showed up in March, and working in committee, working with leadership, and really hoping and doing everything we can to get another veto on this bill.
I still remember very vividly when you shared the news, and it was hot off the presses of it being vetoed with our membership, with our leadership assembly, and the applause and the cheers. And I mean, just an example of how strongly our members feel and how clearly they recognize that this is bad for schools, right, and the kids they serve. Are there things that our members could potentially do to help stop this bill?
Well, I'll be frank. We're not going to stop this bill. It's going to get to the governor's desk. The sponsors, our labor partners at CSEA and CFT, they've really put their weight behind it again this year. And their stated intent is to make sure that all school employees have full-time work and full-time benefits. I think that's a great goal, but unfortunately this bill doesn't do that. And it also does it at the price of student services and even, dissuading some classified positions from seeking more hours and higher ranking positions. So what our members can do is they need to call their senators, gum this up, show that this is not a bipartisan across the board support from the legislature. We need to give the governor every reason we can to veto this bill once again. So we want to see repeat. A couple of Democratic senators held off last year. All the Republicans were no's. So we want a repeat of that again. So when the governor's team is looking back at the paper trail, this clearly was not something that was a slam dunk in the legislature.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that can often get missed is the significance of even one dissenting voice or particularly from the majority party from within the Democratic Party to vote no, and the symbolism of that in providing cover, exactly like you said, to the governor's office. So that's an example of something that we're actively lobbying against and trying to stop. Is there anything that we're advocating for that?
I don't know how to say no. So in my policy area, working with our labor partners, at least for my issues,
So
I just say
defense,
no
huh?
and oppose. I'm not.
For sure.
It's support. I don't say that word hardly ever. I am pleased we are being active in support on a few other types of bills in the social media realm. So making sure that these social media platforms are held accountable for the content that they are pushing out to students, to minors, making sure that there's inappropriate content, that there's a way to take it down so we're not perpetuating whether it's negative body image, fights that are happening on school campus or taunting or bullying online. So we've had some great partners in the legislature with Senator Skinner, Senator Stern. Appreciate the work that Assemblymember Lowenthal has done in this area, and really hope to see some positive moves there, especially given the governor's recent statement that he agrees with the U.S. Surgeon General that social media platforms need to come with a health warning because there is demonstrated, documented impacts on youths and their mental and behavioral health as a direct result from overexposure to social media.
Is this last month of session a time that you find exciting? Is it a time that you
do.
enjoy?
I mean, again, I like to roll up my sleeves. I like to put up a good fight. If it's too calm, at least again in my policy areas, there's something going on. If it's quiet, it's too quiet. So and I will say another thing I miss about this time of year is, pre-COVID, it wasn't great, but it was these war stories where you're in the Capitol till 3 a.m. You're wearing the same clothes you've been wearing for almost 24 hours. You've probably been eaten in 10 hours, but it's where, you have these great memories come about, and you're able to affect some change in the policies that get sent to the governor's desk. It's a lot quieter now with the remote access, with the Capitol being under construction. The physical layout is different. I remember one year, and I'm sure it'll happen again, but just one memory stands out where some staff had to bring their kids in because it was so late, can't leave the kids at home. And the kids were doing a push-up contest just to stay awake in these late hours of session. So, I mean, those are the fun things that you kind of pull out of it. Whether it's actually fun, I think that's sort of a little, amnesia kicks in. You forget about the sore feet and the long hours, but it's great. Yeah, it's a very dynamic, energetic time of year.
Yeah, I mean, just that lived experience of being in the trenches and the relationships that develop as a result of that shared experience is something that you're bringing back fond memories and some maybe not so fond memories too. Dorothy, one question. So we focused a lot on this last month. We've talked about trying to prevent bills from going to the governor's desk. Just so our members understand, what happens after this legislative deadline that they have to pass bills? Looking forward beyond that, what is a time frame or window that our folks should be aware of?
Yes, so really it's going to be another month. So we'll wrap up the legislative session. As Iván, you mentioned, there's whether they pause the clock or not, but somewhere around August 30th, 31st. That's also the life of an advocate is you never get your Labor Day weekend because of the ledge session deadlines. But the legislature will adjourn, and then the governor will basically have 30 days. Normally it's 12 days to sign, but any bill that's sort of passed in this last window before the deadline, he'll have 30 days to sign or veto. And that's when, again, advocates will be sending letters, we'll be meeting with his deputy legislative secretaries to make sure they know our positions. And then, for ACSA, we're a 24/7 organization. We'll move into conference season, travel around, visit our regions, hang out with our members. Contract lobbyists, they go on vacation for 2 or 3 months, but ACSA will be still running the shop up here in Sacramento.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
I'm not bitter about that, by the way. I love going out to the field.
For our listeners, we will keep you updated. I mean, through this medium, through the podcast, but certainly we'll push out information on developments that you need to be aware of through email, through written form. I mean, through verbally when we go in front of your regions and in our conferences to make sure you're up to date on it and any changes and opportunities for you to engage. Dorothy, just appreciate all you do. I know this last month is going to be a really heavy lift for you individually on behalf of our members. So thank you for leading the charge on the bills that you highlighted, but other ones as well that are really important to our membership. But yeah, it should be exciting. I'm looking forward to it as well. I really appreciate you being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work.
All right, that's it for episode 3 of Behind the Bills. Thank you to the team who's behind the scenes and producing our show. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. More importantly, please tell your friends about Behind the Bills. Tell your friends about the ACSA Podcast Network. It includes Legislative Lunch Break, that I know you're very familiar with. It includes this show, Behind the Bills. and it includes our Leadership Classroom podcast. I encourage you to check that one out as well. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.